Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to have a look at the distinctive features of language of literature, and we are going to discuss these features in 2 or 3 different series of 3 lectures, and this series will continue. Today is the beginning. In our last conversation, in our last discussion, we have discussed about the interrelationship between language and literature, looking at a few examples from the text and how multidimensionality and deviation function in literary language very briefly. And today we will first discuss literature, and then we will move on to discuss in detail multidimensionality, deviation, and other literary features, linguistic features which help us in analyzing literary texts. It is inadequate and arbitrary to distinguish language from literature. The notion of two being exclusive is not acceptable. The first question comes to our mind is, what is literature? Is it everything in print? Is it the noble pageant of great books? Is it the finest flower of esoteric delight, culled and savored in secret by the happy few? Hudson says that, quote, literature is a vital record of what men or women or what people have seen in life, what they have experienced of it, what they have thought and felt about those aspects of life which have the most immediate and enduring interest for all of us. It is thus fundamentally an expression of life through the medium of language. Just as colors are medium of expression for the painter, similarly language is a powerful medium of expression for a literary artist or a literary writer. In fact, literature is wholly and inevitably rooted in language. It is no surprise to rediscover in literature certain features that are peculiar to and basic in language. A dream in itself cannot even be called language. Though once verbalized, it might well become literature. All literature is composed of language. George Steiner points out, every literary form is no more, no less than a language act, a combination of stylistic units. There can conceivably be language without literature. There can be no literature without language. Thus, literature presupposes language, though the reverse is not true. Childhood without manhood is commonplace, but manhood without childhood is unthinkable. Same is the case with language and literature, where literature without language is not possible. Literature is the exercise of language. We may know a language very well in an ordinary way, and yet be unable to enjoy perfectly some of the greatest writers in it. It is so because the language of literature has its own certain distinctive features. In music, the musician with their skills, instruments and capabilities add order, selection of the severest kind, design and within the capability of the medium, meaning so it is when language becomes literature. So language provides design. Literature involves a spatial selection and patterning of events and creation of a focus and form through linguistic exploitation. The literary writer creates significant new experiences for the reader. Significant because focused and formed, in which the reader can participate and that he may use to give him a greater awareness and understanding of his world. René Bolek and Austin Warren said in their book Theory of Literature, I quote here, quote, a literary work of art is not a simple object but rather a highly complex organization of a stratified character with multiple meaning and relationships. Now I am going to take up 3 expressions which embody much the same idea, but they are conveyed in different verbal pattern. or linguistic patterning is different. The first expression is all day, that is from morning till evening. The second expression is from morn till eve. The third expression is from the wails of the morning to where the crickets sing. For brevity and clearness or preciseness, the first phrase cannot be surpassed. There is nothing ambiguous or undecided about it. No explanation is required. All day, we are very much clear. That is from morning, from the moment when the sun rises, till evening when the sun sets, or till the night approaches. For all ordinary purposes, it is sufficient and complete. At the same time, it arouses no particular emotion in the reader, but it is in itself frigid and colorless. Then the color is heightened and we get a more spirited phrase like the second one, from morn till eve. But when we come to the third phrase, that is from the wails of the morning to where the crickets sing, we are at once in a new world with new standards of judgment. It gives indeed no direct expression to the thought, but suggests instead two pictures and leaves the reader to gather the underlying idea of himself or herself. Evidently, it is the product of an entirely different attitude to life. And though the phrase is here torn from its context, we can still see something of the beauty of the two pictures it presents. The picture of morning and the picture of evening. One of early morning, when the hillsides are clothed in a thick mist betokening or indicating the obscurity and wonder of a new day. The other of a cheerful health where the cricket's song seems charming. The day's work has been accomplished. The mystery unfolded, and so the curtain falls upon contentment and repose, quietness. When the poet wrote this phrase, he was perhaps giving expression to the sudden and passionate yearning that comes upon the exile in a London street as he thinks of his distant home. How differently the day would be spent there. All they would do for the deadening, ordinary routine of London life, but that momentary vision of home demanded something very different. So the passionate longing aroused in the poet's heart struggles to find utterance in glowing words which should convey something of its depth and beauty. The fitting expression of such moments of exaltation is found in literary language, and that are the language of a poet. Poetry, as Wordsworth has pointed out, we have discussed it earlier also while we were doing Wordsworth's poem, The Solitary Reaper. We had discussed this definition of poetry. Wordsworth said, poetry is the emotions recollected in tranquility. The poet then must have what Mr. Clutton Brock aptly terms high experiencing power. He sees more than we see, and then makes us see also what he sees, and feels more than we usually feel, and then makes us also feel the same. But if poetry makes greater demands upon the poet, it also makes greater demands upon the reader also. The essence of poetry, technically, says Professor McHale, is that it is patterned language. Remember, patterned language, the rhyme scheme, the rhythm that is produced through the patterning of the sounds and the stressed or unstressed patterns in a line, all are designed, effecting a very powerful sense of the words that are set in a poem. Thus, inspiration along with artistry has given in our literary work. Let us consider Dryden's views in this matter. We must not only choose our words for elegance, but for sound, to perform which a mastery in the language is required. The poet must have a magazine of words. Magazine of words means unlimited source of words, lexical items, and he chooses from that unlimited source of words, or that magazine of words, from which he tries to create the exact effect which he intends to communicate or convey to his reader. For example, the sounds which he chooses to produce through certain words in the poem, they may create an onomatopoeic effect, and that onomatopoeic effect, or the alliteration, sometimes the assonance, the consonants, all of them are chosen deliberately by the poet, because in the absence of chosen words, the effect that is created through alliteration or assonance or consonance or onomatopoeia will be missing in the poem, and then it won't be a literary language. I once again go back to Dryden, and Dryden's views are: we must not only choose our words for elegance but for sound, to perform which a mastery in the language is required. The poet must have a magazine of words and have the all to manage his vowels to the best advantage, that they may go the farther. We must also know the nature of the vowels, which are more loud and which are more soft and sweet, and so dispose them as his present occasion requires. For example, we talked about the plosive sound and the effect of the plosive sound created in William Blake's poem London. You go back and see that video. I have discussed in detail about the effect of the plosives in the poem. Thus, in everyday use of language, we generally concentrate on the content rather than the form of the message, whereas in literary language, form is as important as content. According to G.N. Leach, the distinction between poetic language and ordinary language is the subject for discussion under these 3 points primarily. First, poetic language may violate or deviate from the generally observed rules of language in many different ways, from obvious, some subtle. Both the means of and motive for deviation are worth careful study, and we'll look at it in detail in the later part of our discussion. Second, the creative writer, and more particularly the poet, enjoys a unique freedom amongst users of the language to range over all its communicative resources without respect to the social or historical contents to which they belong. It means, amongst other things, that the poet can draw on the language of the past ages, or can borrow features belonging to the other non-literary uses of language, as Ezra Pound or T.S. Eliot, for example, have made use of English, banal, proxy, conversational in some of their poems. Third, and most important, most of what is considered characteristic of literary language, for example, is the use of tropes like irony, metaphor, simile, and other figures of speech, nevertheless has its root in everyday use of language, and can be best studied, not only can be studied, but can be best studied with some references to these uses. Just as there is no firm dividing line between poetic and ordinary language, so it would be artificial to enforce a clear division between the language of poetry, considered as verse literature, and that of other literary kinds, that is the language of prose, language of novel, or language of short stories. There can be poetic prose also. Thus, literary language has certain specific features which distinguish it from ordinary language. It may therefore be distinguished from the ordinary or the everyday or the non-literary language on the basis of three qualities along with a number of other characteristics. The basic three qualities which make a distinction between the language of literature and ordinary language are: number one, multidimensionality of meaning; number two, compression or discontinuity of expression; and number three, aesthetic function. Now we'll discuss one by one what do we mean by multidimensionality, or what do we mean by compression and discontinuity, or what do we understand by aesthetic functions. First, let me take up multidimensionality. Multidimensionality of meaning refers to the fact that in literary discourse, words may not mean only what they say. The words may mean more than what they actually say. The surface level meaning and the deeper level meaning, or the denotative meaning and the connotative meaning of the language, about which we have briefly talked earlier also. Literary writers acquire this multidimensionality of meaning by manipulating various language resources such as symbol, metaphor, simile, imagery, verse, rhythm, etc. This multi-layeredness of meaning is more specific a characteristic of poetry than that of prose. Denotation and connotation are also a means of acquiring multidimensionality of meaning in a literary text. Always remember denotation. Denotation means the direct meaning of the word. Sun, S-U-N, sun, for example. If I ask you what does sun mean, or if we start thinking of what does sun mean, all of us, at once our mind goes to the sun giving us light as a member of the planet system. But when the poet can use it in a different context, it can convey another layer of meaning. Sun may also stand for light. Sun may also stand for light in one's life, in the sense of having knowledge, because without knowledge, just as without sun life is in darkness, similarly without knowledge human life may be in darkness. So that is the connotative meaning of sun. Denotation refers to the literal meaning or the direct meaning of a word, while connotation refers to the implied meaning of a word. So sun implies not only a member of the planet system or the solar system, but at the same time sun also implies light, or sun can also imply darkness also when used in a binary system. So there are layers of meanings. Non-literary language therefore may be said to be transparent in the sense that it means what it says. Literary language is opaque because it may not mean what it says. It may have several different associations. Let me give a pause here, and in our next conversation, in our next discussion, we shall continue with all these distinctive features of language of literature which can help us to analyze literary text, read literary text in a right perspective. Thank you very much.